Hi, and welcome back to Dr. Jordan B. Peterson's 12 Rules for Life. Today we have rule number 5. Do not let your children do anything that makes you dislike them. That sounds like some sound advice. It would be kind of a bummer if you didn't like your kid. Having that parent-child relationship. It's kind of nice to have a friend when you go home or when they go home, especially when they grow up. I think you can develop that relationship. You love your kid and you can hang out and be friends, but as your kid gets older and I guess the kid gets to my age, and the relationship I have with my parents has changed and formed as I become an adult. And I guess, as Peterson said in the past, it becomes more of a unique person and characteristic as the person gets older. And I think that's the same thing that happens with your parents. You can truly become better friends, I think, as you get older and gain some more wisdom. And so let's get into it. We can start with page 115. Peterson here mentions Freud's account on a child who is having preferential treatment from their parent. Freud seems to think that if the mother gives the child preferential treatment, they can go on to be a conqueror, and they can have lots of confidence and take on the world, which has made me start wondering if anything changes if the dad gives preferential treatment to the son. I think throughout this chapter there's a lot of talk about the mother-son relationship, and I would say less so father-daughter, and those bonds typically they can run pretty strong, and I think those are the ones that people often talk about most, because you hear about a daddy's girl or a mama's boy. And before the Freud quote, Peterson is a little bit more neutral. He doesn't really mention any gender about getting the preferential treatment. They just say if they get preferential treatment, they can go on to conquer the world and have all this confidence. And I guess just drawing from my own experiences, I think the sons really do cling to their mothers a lot of the times, but then again, there are a lot more, I would say, single mothers than single fathers. So if you are to encounter a boy, they're either going to have a mother or they're going to be a single mother, and they cling really hard to that mom. And when there's I think they call them girl dads nowadays, they're more willing to set aside their manliness and do things for their daughter. Which my dad, I wasn't born then, but apparently he'd come home and he'd do the tutu and the tea parties with my sister, and that's just what you got to do for your kids. Peterson talks about that. You got to give them attention, and you got to give them rewards, or else they will lash out in anger because they want that attention. So if you give that attention to them and you want to talk with them more and hang out with them, they're going to accept that, and they're going to love that a lot more. Page 117, Peterson is talking about feeding his kid, his son, and how that was a challenge and a struggle to get through. And it reminded me of my Nana, who is my grandma, but we called her Nana. She would always check on us after we finished our meal. We had this little ritual where you would eat your full meal and then be like, Nana, I'm all done. And she's like, all right, let me see. And you'd have to open up and go, ah, and she'd look inside your mouth and she'd be like, oh, nice job. Good job. You ate your whole meal. I can see it down there. You are full, she'd tell us that we're full and everything. And I'd always wonder, how can she tell? And, my siblings or my cousins or whoever's with me, we'd stare in each other's mouths and be like, how does she know we're full? How can she tell? But I guess that's just the magic. It comes when you're a Nana, when you're a grandparent, you get to do those things with your kid. Actually, this chapter, now that I think of it, reminds me of the punishment techniques that my Nana came up with. She was never really much of a punisher, but she was a very creative woman. And we were in the back of her car driving down a road, and her sister was in the passenger seat. And my cousins and I, we were very close. We were like 6 months apart, and then our younger one's 3 years younger than us. But we were all messing around in the back seat, and she needed us to calm down and to, stop messing around, have some discipline. And she said, "Oh, boys." We're like, "What?" She's like, "Oh, I see her." We're like, "What do you see, Nana?" And she was like, "That woman, she's on the corner." And we're like, "What about her?" She's like, "She's a children checker." And we got so scared. And she said, there's children checkers that make sure that kids are behaving, and they're just out there in society, and they'll report back, to the government to make sure that the children are behaving. So if you guys aren't behaving right now, you guys might get reported, and you may have to, go on some timeouts or something like that. And oh boy, we straightened up, and everywhere we went, we were always looking for children checkers and trying to be, just be good kids, because we were scared that the children checkers were watching and they might report us. And that always did the trick. That, and when we were real small, she would put on the Spanish station and the Spanish music station, and that, for some reason, I think maybe just the other language or something, and we would just calm right down and like put us in a trance. But yeah, she had some creative ways of getting us to calm down and have some discipline. Pages 119 through 123. He talks about Jean-Jacques Rousseau. Rousseau believes that man is corrupted by human society and private ownership, and that the noble savage is someone who's untouched by society and is inherently good and can walk freely without sin, just as Adam did with God before he put his lips to those apples, to the apple. And Peterson spends the remainder of these pages trying to, and in my opinion, disprove that a man untouched by society is good. I mean, he does it through the chimpanzees, proving that it's their natural tendency to tear each other apart and have that proclivity for evil. And how the kind of uncontracted tribes, or tribes that have not been introduced to society as much, typically have higher murder rates than others. And he's just saying that society helps to shape organized, disciplined people who are, nice. And I think he's true. I think if you aren't introduced to society and familiar with other people, you're going to be skeptical. And I mean, it's in every physical living being, you have that self-preservation inside of you. So if you're being introduced to something new, you're going to be a little bit more standoffish and cavish. I think is what they used in One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. Was it cavish? It was something like that. I can't remember the exact wording, but standoffish and a bit scared and timid of those around you. But if you're introduced to society, you're introduced to meeting new people, you shake their hand, you have a conversation with them, you get to know them, and you have a diverse group of people that you have to meet every single day, you'll become more understanding and better acclimated to meeting new people and new situations, and you'll have less of a tendency to want to have like this tribalism and try to fight the other people, but maybe more cooperation. And instead of the first thing when you meet someone new is to reach for something to protect you, but maybe reach for your hand out to shake theirs and to get to know them. And so when you're introduced to society, it can help you become a good person. And yes, society can harbor, based on how you're raised and stuff, an evil person, but it also helps shape and mold, because children and people, for that matter, are malleable. You can mold them and fix them into whatever you want, and then eventually you go to the oven and you're kind of ingrained with everything that you grew up with, and that's inside of you, and that kind of creates your disposition and everything. But sometimes you can break that clay and put together a new piece that may make you a better person. But definitely you do become a better person when you're introduced to society and you do the proper introduction in that way. You can't just be a noble savage. Okay. Page 125. Oh, this was interesting. It's not even like a thought experiment. It's more of just you're thinking of the questions incorrectly. When he mentions that peace is very difficult, you should not be wondering why someone is violent, but you should be wondering why people are peaceful, or why people do not take drugs, because it is the easier path to be violent, or to take drugs to escape something. Like that is it did like kind of blow my mind a little bit when I read that people have to choose peace rather than choose violence, because it's your natural tendency to get angry, to fight, and to want to hurt or prove yourself to the other person. But it reminded me, I think it's the Smiths song, but I prefer the Jeff Buckley version of I wrote it down. Oh yes, the song is "I Know It's Over" by the Smiths. Jeff Buckley version is also divine. And there's a line in the song, and it's, it takes strength to be gentle and kind. It takes strength to be gentle and kind. And before that, the line is, it's easy to hate, it's easy to hurt. And it is easy to hate and to make fun of and to hurt others. And I think that's why Jesus had, if you do the Bible thing, he taught that you have to turn the other cheek, and that is a choice. You can choose to fight the other person, but it's not really a hard choice. You don't have to have a lot of strength to choose the anger and the fight. You have to have strength within inside yourself to calm yourself down and think about what you're about to do and make a decision from there. If you're more so choosing peace than you are violence. That's why people have to go to like anger management, right? Because they're not there to make their anger more apt and more readily available. They're there to learn to control their anger and to calm themselves down, because it's easy to have an outburst, but it's hard to keep that outburst inside and release it in a healthy manner. And so it is quite amazing that we are able as a society to calm ourselves down and to, I think we all have the strength every day to choose peace and to do the right thing. We all have to have the strength to choose to do the right thing. And every single one of us almost every day has that choice, and a lot of us do make that choice. And we should be, I think, pretty proud that we have the strength where, I guess it can come easy, but it's really not. And as a society, we've learned to teach that and instill that in our young, and I think that's a very good thing, and that's what Peterson wants us to do as well. Page 126, the very next one, Peterson's talking about like an infant teaching. An infant is like a blind person trying to find the wall to see how far their limits can go. And I happen to agree with that. I'm the youngest sibling, and I just remember growing up always trying to find that wall with my siblings or my parents or whatever it was. It was just like, how far can I go until I get in trouble? I remember having a Nerf gun and just pointed at my sister, and she kept getting upset that I was shooting her. And then my dad finally came and he's like, if you shoot her, I'm gonna break that gun. And I'm staring at my dad, and then I look at my sister, and I stare at my dad, and for whatever reason, I shot her. And he took that gun away for a while. He broke it on the spot. That was it. No more of that Nerf gun. I loved that Nerf gun. That Nerf gun was cool. It was like the double barrel shotgun. It came with some shells. I guess technically it wasn't Nerf. It was like Buzzbee toys, but the same idea. But I loved that Nerf gun. But yeah, I guess I was just really testing his limits, and that's just what kids do. And so you have to be there to guide them to set that wall and to set that boundary and to set that early, so maybe eventually you don't have to go and break the Nerf gun. But yeah, I remember that. I remember that very vividly. He just staring right into my dad's eyes and just I shot my sister. Oh man, the things we do, people, the things we do. Page 129. Oh, Peterson talking about how he's putting that little monster to bed kept reminding me of like the stories you could hear of people giving their kids or other people's kids like a babysitter like a shot of whiskey or whatever alcohol, and it helps them go right to bed. I don't know why that popped into my head, but yeah, don't do that. Don't give your kids the alcohol. But yeah, that just kept reminding me of that, of one way to help put your kid to bed. Okay. Pages 130 and 136, he's just talking about discipline and punishment, and it was kind of hard it wasn't, I could read through it and understand everything. It's just, I'm not a father, I'm the youngest sibling. I never really had to deal with disciplining kids or any of that. The closest thing I've come to is my dogs, trying to teach them to behave and to enter dog society, because if you don't train your dog, they're typically, almost every dog will go wild when they see another person or another dog. If you take them on a walk, they're not just gonna sit or walk past another dog. They're just gonna They see that dog, they're gonna just stare at it. Then they'll start growling. Then they'll start barking, and you cannot control them. So you have to teach them and introduce them, just like a child, how to enter the dog/human world and how to be a proper law-abiding dog. And you just gotta reward them like you should a child. They do a good thing, they get the cookie, they get the pat, they get the love. You let them know. But they do something wrong, you have your word. You say no, you say stop, or you say leave it, or enough, whatever your word is, to make them stop and to know that wasn't good. And by the tone of your voice, they can tell. And sometimes, I had my bad days. I was tired or I was hungry, and they messed up, and it was the same thing that they messed up on before countless times, and you just can't. You haven't broken the habit yet, and you just you just let out a louder outburst than usual. And that's just one of the things you have to learn how to control as a parent. You're going to have those days. Later on, Peterson talks about having a second parent there to help you out, and that is important, to have other people, to have that support system. And God bless you if you are the only one there. That has to be a very, 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 very hard job to manage all of that. That's incredible. Just like he said before, it's broken and wounded people trying to hold things all together. And it truly is. That's mostly my experience with discipline and punishment. But I plan on, taking a lot of these with my own kids one day, because I do plan on having kids. Oh, page 137. Peterson goes over all these rules that will make a child be welcome everywhere. And obviously I agree with them. They all make sense, but he was also saying how you shouldn't have a lot of rules. So I'm not sure if he narrowed down these rules to just these, or if he was thinking about, I'm sure he was thinking about it when he laid them all out there. He had to be. But to me, it just felt like a lot of rules. But I guess it's not. It's just that you're inundated with all this information at once. And then if you just go through it slowly and teach someone over time then which over the course of a kid's life, from they're born to when they're, I don't know, call it 12. No, they should be acclimated by then. Acclimated by, I don't know, 8 years old. I don't really know. But I'm sure you can get to all of them by then, or something to that nature. But to me, it just seemed like a lot of rules at once, and he said to keep it simple. So I just thought that was interesting. Page 139, he describes timeouts as giving the same physiological neurobiologically similar characteristics to physical punishment, and that's probably that. I mean, according to the data, it's true. That makes sense. I mean, it's not just like a mental pain and struggle that you have to get to being in your timeout and your confinement. You're also physically restrained, I guess. You can't really move or go anywhere, and that can be tough. And I was I was given timeouts as a kid. I think they're pretty effective, and I guess I'm just gonna go into page 141 as well, because he talks about timeouts and how they can be used, because it's similar to what I'm talking about now, and how the child is allowed back into society once they calm down and become just like a law-abiding person again, which teaches them that they need to restrain themselves and be calm, and then they will be accepted back into society. And I mean, that's exactly how my timeouts went, and I happen to agree with that. I think that's completely true, and that's a good way about going it. I'm not sure if I would spank my child. Of course, you don't know what you're going to do until you're entered in that situation, but I definitely know I'll be using the timeout thing as a form of punishment, as well as the children checkers. That should be good, and a reward system. I remember as a kid, if my mom would just get too fed up, she'd be like, all right, you're just going to stay in your room until your father gets home. And yeah, of course we had been fighting or whatever. And then eventually my dad gets home, but he wouldn't get home till much later. So, by then I've already calmed down and it's okay. So dad would just walk in and just be like, oh, so what happened this time? It's just, we would just have a conversation about it instead of me fighting him. Which was always funny. I never really had to fight. It was more just a conversation at that point. It reminded me of this, there's this radio show called the Rad Radio, Rob, Anybody, and Don. And the Rob guy who runs it says by 8 years old, his father treated him as an adult. He didn't really have any like punishments or anything. His dad would just talk to him as like an adult, and they would talk about his decisions and why he did this versus that, and why that was wrong and stuff like that. And I feel like that's kind of how my dad was treating me there, which I think is another healthy way to just discuss and be okay with talking about your mistakes and how you're going to fix them. It just depends on the severity of my mistake and how I need to learn and all that. That's pretty much all I have for this chapter. I didn't even like read directly from the book, but it was more like a lot of information and data and support for how to discipline and punish your child. And it is important to teach them and to make sure they're disciplined and to go out in the world, because he's exactly right. If you don't teach them to act properly, the world's going to do it, and the world will not be kind and as gentle and come from a place of love as a parent. And the child may grow up to start hating the world. So it needs to be done, and your child needs to learn, develop, and grow, and that should be done through the parent. So I guess we can next time read rule number 6 together. Set your house in perfect order before you criticize the world. Alrighty, till next time, take care, and I hope you learn, and I hope your children grow up to someone that you like.